Hello, dear colleagues. I am Yengay Natalia Viktorovna, an Kurgan English teacher, and I am glad to present you the topic of our seminar, Formative Assessment Tools for Research Skills Development, Grade 11, Unit 1B, Content with Language, Investigate and Report on Animal World, Bats, Eagles, Bees, and Dolphins. Having a look at the presented theme, it is clear that the aim of this seminar is to consider formative assessment tools as motivators for research skills development. We are going to consider the following questions. What research skills could be developed? What formative assessment tools could be used in accordance with learning objectives? What rubrics are important to organize communication process? What we have as a basis to work with. The unit is presented with 12 learning objectives, which should be covered through the time. I tried to classify the type of learning objective and examples of appropriate assessment. If your learning objectives contained such words like recall, recognize, identify, objective test items such as fill in the blank, matching, labeling, or multiple choice questions can require students to recall or recognize terms, facts, and concepts. If we look at such words like interpret, exemplify, classify, summarize, infer, compare, explain, activities such as papers, exams, problem sets, class discussions, or concept maps that require students to summarize readings, films, or speeches, compare and contrast two or more theories, events, or processes. Classify or categorize cases, elements, or events using established criteria. Paraphrase documents or speeches. Find or identify examples of illustrations of a concept or principle. With such learning objectives as apply, execute, implement, activities such as problem sets, performances, labs, or simulations that require students to use procedures to solve or complete familiar or unfamiliar tasks, determine which procedures are most appropriate for a given task. With the words analyze, differentiate, organize, attribute, determine bias values in presented material. The words evaluate, check, critique, assess. Activities such as journals, diaries, problem sets, product reviews, or studies that require students to test, monitor, judge, or critique readings, performances, or products against established criteria or standards. With the words create, generate, plan, produce, design, activities such as research projects, performances, essays, business plans, websites designs, or set designs that require students to make, build, design, or generate something new. I believe that you can continue the list using more examples from your practice, but words about research sometimes just means finding out information about a topic. You can certainly develop advanced information retrieval skills in working with sources. However, specific understandings of research carry a lot of weight. The classic definition is that research leads to an original contribution to knowledge in a particular field of inquiry by defining an important question or problem and then answering or solving it in a systematic way. Following the critical path provided by Cambridge, we can see 4 stages connected with each other. You see, deconstruction could be based on the previous knowledge or background information. Reconstruction, learners rebuild the context taking into consideration new findings. Reflection, learners reflect on their work at every stage of the research. All 3 stages go through communication and collaboration leading to the results presentation. At the same time, the presented research skills could be developed through the unit. It is without a doubt that there are more research skills than you can see on the slide. However, the 6 ones could be a good start for research skills development. As you remember, by the end of the unit, learners prepare a 5-minute ICT presentation on the theme of bats. They should follow one of the topics presented in a question form. At the same time, these questions couldn't be considered as research questions. They just defined the area for research. These questions are not research ones as well, because they are too specific and not arguable. I used them as motivators for the next activities during the lessons. I am sure that learners should be interested in the topic which they investigate. That is why it is important to define the sphere they like. I made these stripes with the questions and put them on the desk before the lessons. When students came, they saw the questions and tried to answer them. Some biology students gave even more information than it needed. Students answered the questions from 1 to 3 according to their choice, thereby detecting the sphere of their interests. Research skill. Ask good questions. So, asking a good research question is important for successful research. The skill is developing and refining research questions to get better research results. The challenge. Students will enter a research term, say megabats, and come through pages or results that aren't related to their research, rather than narrowing their original topic, how the appearance of megabats influenced on Western cinema culture. The solution. You can provide learners with the information from the link you see. Ask learners to transfer the topics into research questions and evaluate them whether they are clear, focused, arguable. Compare the results and discuss how changing a few words can generate different information. Forming a good research question provides us an opportunity to monitor students' speaking skills. Divide learners into pairs or small groups for the pre-research discussion. Their responses to the questions will help you to assess their syntax and vocabulary. Listen to their discussions about the topics, listening to answers the learners, and give brief feedback. Learners choose one of the topics and discuss how they can transfer the topic into a research question. Write down your research question and sub-questions which you are going to investigate. Let's watch how our students discuss the results of their work.
How should we protect bats? And I wanted to protect the environment with protection and with conservation. And my research question is, since bats control disease populations, we have to protect bats. And my sub-questions is, how can we protect bats from diseases? It's connected with your topic. How can we protect bats from diseases? Like what people can do for bats, and how environment affects the bats living type of living, like something like this. What about your topic?
And my topic is how can vampire bats help us with strong treatment? And I used those type of questions. First is, I think the first and the second questions are related with each other. First, it was the future of bats from a biological point of view, because it is stroke treatment, it is part of biology. Second one, what parts of body are useful for the prevention of strokes? Third one, where can vampire bats can be used, maybe some types of medicine, which type exactly?
I think that the first question is related to the first one.
First is where, in which country is it traditional to use this type of vampire bots treatment. The first one I try to maybe show some point for looking for alert to the future, how can this type of vampire rats can affect on the future.
Kinds of plants influence on American culture. Your situation?
Our topic was what diseases can bats suffer from and transmit, and we decided to create a research question that sounds like this: how the tropical environment affects on bats' diseases.
And first we will talk about how whole bats, all bats, common bats influence on American culture. It means we will talk that, for example, bats are the symbol of fear, of night, of darkness, and that is all.
And we want to discuss to take bats that live in tropical areas and research what types of diseases bats suffer from in tropical areas, how do they transmit these diseases, whom do they transmit, and what are the methods of treating these diseases.
What are your sub-questions? Maybe our sub-question is which kinds of bats exist in territory of America. Second is how bats affect on American culture in different parts of time.
For example, in 20th century and at this moment, and we will compare it.
I had three different alternatives and I have chosen one of them. Firstly, I would like to read these alternatives. How does humanity make use of bats in genital navigating skill? What benefits can humanity obtain using technologies in the nature, like echolocating in the 21st century? And the last but not the least, what lessons can we learn in navigating and spatial orientation from bats' inherent ability of echolocating? I have 5 sub-questions. Here they are. How do bats navigate? Which of the modern technologies allude to the bats' skills? What benefits do we have? Do bats obtain any profit from such kind of collaboration with humans? And is it an unprecedented case?
Okay, and what of these 3 research questions would you choose?
As I have said before, I will choose the third one. Learn and navigating and spatial orientation from bats and the current ability of echolocating.
Nice. And would you like to create a presentation?
Yes, I do.
As a result, you will have 5 research questions. Let's look how the questions were transferred into the research questions. The topic what different kinds of bats exist went to the how different kinds of bats influenced on American culture. How do bats navigate? What benefits can humanity obtain using such natural technologies as echolocation in the 21st century, or how bats echolocation influenced on military forces development of the USA? Why and how should we protect bats? How did bats protection projects influence on bats population in Africa? What diseases can bats suffer from and transmit? How the tropical environment affects on bats' diseases? How can vampire bats help us with stroke treatment? What is the role of vampire bats in people's fears and stroke treatment? Next research skill. Go beyond the surface. The skill. Displaying persistence by continuing to pursue information to gain a broad perspective. The challenge. Studies have shown that when using a research engine, students often stop at the first research result, which they deem the most trustworthy. The solution. Invite students to create fact trees about whatever they are researching. Encourage students to find at least 10 sources of information to complete their fact trees. Here you can see the example of formative assessment. You see, the task is learners complete the fact tree with your findings. Learners have met this learning objective if they can create fact trees about the topic and find at least 10 sources of information to complete their fact trees. Learners' findings are used further in a hypothesis guide. The guide consists of 6 parts: question, information, hypothesis, data, results, and conclusion. One part flows out from the previous, and all 5 should support the conclusion. Here you can see the example of our students' work. This is not an example of excellent work. The student worked about one of the sub-questions and needed feedback to improve the work. For example, you made great job. Your information is supported by facts from various sources. You have strong conclusions supported by the reasons. What could you do to improve the hypothesis? How to make it clear, focused, and arguable? Results. You can monitor, take notes on how well the groups work, and provide support as necessary as learners search for and compare information. Your students search for information, identify, select, adapt, and summarize relevant content, discussing how to make content interesting, persuasive, and attractive. The next research skill: check your sources. The skill evaluating information found in your sources on the basis of accuracy, validity, appropriateness for needs, importance, and social and cultural context. The challenge: while most students know not to believe everything they read online, the majority also don't take the time to fully evaluate their sources. The solution: as a class, discuss the benchmarks for evaluating a website: currency, security, scope, and authority. During research projects, encourage students to check the benchmarks of a list for each of the sources they use. To develop this research skill, you can suggest that your learners use Raven strategy from global perspective and project subject. Learners work about reputability, ability to see, vested interests, and neutrality of the sources they use. If they are not familiar with this strategy, the discussion of the questions from the slide provides your learners with qualitative information to use. Here you can see the example of formative assessment. Learning objective: reading. Begin to select and evaluate paper and digital reference sources to check meaning and extend understanding. The task: evaluate one of your sources using the categories. Success criteria: learners have met this learning objective if they can provide the information about credibility of the selected sources. Results: your learners are provided with qualitative information. They can work with sources, finding, selecting, and evaluating credible information. And what do we have at the end of these lessons? The development of language skills, and learners avoid plagiarism. Next research skill: organization of good communication. This skill: present the information in an acceptable way. The challenge: learners read from the slides. Post-presentation discussion is more about weak sides. Learners more critique the peers' works than evaluate them. The solution: ask learners to do peer assessment and include culture of PowerPoint presentation into success criteria. Suggest that learners use 2 stars and 1 question strategy. You can see this example of 2 stars and 1 question strategy as the format of formative assessment. Learning objective: understand the detail of an argument in unsupported extended talk on a wide range of general and curricular topics, including talk on a growing range of unfamiliar topics. Success criteria. Learners have met this learning objective if they can comment or ask questions about specific points in the presentations they hear. You see that they have tasked to do two most interesting points in presentation and one point to improve the presentation. And they have to ask three interesting questions about the presentation. And as a result, we have that learners know the difference between assessment and evaluation. They do peer assessment in accordance with teacher's assessment. That is the end of our first part. Thank you for your attention. And here you can see the list of materials were used in this presentation.